Chapter 7 The Path of the Righteous. The power of the beam has unsettled him. As his essence careens through time and space, he realizes his will is worn. The beam has caused an amount of damage to him that he refuses to let me be aware of. Had he not been so harshly struck by the technological stream of positrons, he certainly would have managed to burst himself to the precise destination he took aim for. Although he does manage to land where he has planned, his will has trouble forming up particles into a destination body, and it isn't until the year 2822 that he reconverges in Brazil, South America. The time of warfare has ended. It is now the end of humanity's technological age, a mere 400 years before his own birth. Daniel can feel the warm, humid air around him and falls to his knees from the pain he has not yet overcome. He can feel millions of positrons floating around his system and tries to either drive them out or convert them into usable energy. He stands on shaky legs. He is calm, yet in pain. He is content, yet tortured. He has no time to heal himself. As he has come this far, he is so close to the end that he forsakes his own well-being and continues with his mission. As he walks through the highlands between the rivers Tapajos and Xingu, he hears a silence that arouses his curiosity. He hears no sound of animal or human. This is the time period of humanity's turn inwards. After destroying a good portion of the land, humans took shelter within giant structures that enclosed whole societies. By this point in history, most animals, those considered inferior to humans, were extinct, exterminated by the tribal humans that survived the era of war. Some humans refused to commit their lives to indoor activities and rough it on the harsh lands left. Scattered individuals raise families throughout the world. Some even band together at this point to pose an opposition to the global government that is ruled by the Torex, that rules those tetra cities. Daniel walks through this wasteland. He can feel faint amounts of energy around him, but he chooses to generate and magnify his own. The wind begins to blow against him, and he leans counterpoint into it. He forms the energy, condensing it further and further in on itself until the orbs are around his upper body. He can feel the land draining energy from the orbs as he struggles to enlarge them. He can feel the soil, devoid of life, feasting on the replenishing energy from inside the orbs. Daniel works quickly to solidify the spherical masses. He also feels the gaze of eyes upon him. Joachim is at the control board again. He has seen over 1,000 years pass before his eyes. He sits with a patience that comes with that many years' experience. He has circled the globe more than 50 times. He has seen occurrences that defy natural law and atrocities that defy human compassion. He has seen the world plunge into the uncivil depths of battle on 3 occasions, each one reaching points more horrific than the last. He has weathered the storm and sits in silence, awaiting the conclusion of his destiny. He has ventured to the sites of each of the crystal towers to see what he has created. He couldn't help notice the strong surges of emotion he felt while gazing at each of the areas. He questions if the towers produced that feeling or if he simply felt it from himself. He has returned to Sumatra 200 years after leaving. He has waited out the harsh season of combat that befell the earth and was instrumental in building the weapons used by the army that ended that warfare. In return, the global dominator allowed him to exist beyond the confines of their society. Trade is restricted to all parts of the world, and Joachim is glad that his homestead is self-sufficient. He lives with a community of 300 employees, most of whom have been born on the headquarters grounds. They survive silently, having no contact with other societies. They are alone. As is Joachim. He has lived longer than even he had expected. He has watched generation after generation mature into power and recede into old age and death. He holds on to what he can, but every fractal piece of his life seems temporary. Every face, every personality would, one day, no longer be with him. He no longer tries to keep anyone at his side, as he is aware that they would soon pass on and leave him alone. And so he watches the screen, waiting for the signal from below. He has convinced himself that this is his only reason for continuing living. He must fulfill the task given to him so long ago that he has forgotten its purpose. He knows that he is creating giant shards of the organic computer he had first seen 800 some odd years ago, but the reason for doing so escapes him. Yet he stands by his post. He stays at his station night and day, awaiting the final signal, envisioning how he would dive headfirst from the pinnacle of the waterfall once he has completed his job. He waits and closes his eyes. Had he really seen all there is to see in life? Had he really done it all and had no new experience to look forward to, he might have gone through with it and killed himself. But he wonders, as he sits, why he can't remember periods in his life with clear recollection. Points in his life, at times whole centuries, are a mystery to him. He has forgotten many pages of his personal history, and that accounts for something. He rationally thinks that if he can honestly forget certain aspects, then he can experience those aspects again with the same wonder and joy he felt the first time. He thinks how sad it is that a man like himself would be living his life in reruns. Yet, if he truly doesn't remember them, then he may have evolved into a new being. He can shed the life he has lived through the way a snake sheds its skin. Then this new him can rejoice in the world. This new self, the product of a rebirth, can live a life as full and as long as the last one he lived. His memories are slipping away from him fast. The basis of his identity is slipping out of his mind's grasp. In the final moment before the separation, the signal comes up on screen. Joachim takes aim and fires. When he lifts his finger, he has no idea who he is or where he is, but he is certain he will find out. Beyond the atmosphere of the Earth, Biotech 2, the last of the fully equipped satellites, takes position over South America as it powers up. The barrel of the positron ray swivels and takes precise aim, but the targeting mechanism is old, and the gun locks in place less than 2 seconds from the actual mark. Daniel realizes this the moment he sees the first sign of the beam in the sky. It is off the mark by about 300 feet, and he does what he can to compensate. The beam pummels the ground and causes a crater to appear. Daniel lifts the orbs and sends them to intercept the beam. When he has corrected the technological mishap, Daniel feels pangs of terror, then silence, and he knows that he has taken a life with his action. When the wind has settled and he sees the top of the final tower extending 200 feet in the air, he turns towards the eyes that are looking at him. A child with dark hair stands hidden in the shadows of the low-hanging tree branches. Daniel looks at the frightened youth and motions for him to come closer. The 5-year-old toddles out into the sun and walks cautiously forward. He is no older than 5 and would be called an outsider by modern classification standards. Daniel crouches down. "Hello, I'm Daniel," he says. "What is your name?" "I'm Tam Chi," the child answers. "Tell me, Tam, why are you out here alone?" "I'm not. I'm waiting for my mother and father to return from gathering wood," the child replies. Daniel suddenly knows that the terror he has felt was from the child's parents before they were scorched to death by the misguided ray. The path of the righteous is marked by boundaries of well-intended mistakes, Daniel says, placing his hand on the shoulder of the child. "You must come with me." The change is instantaneous. Daniel forces his fatigued consciousness into a series of bursts, taking the child with him as he travels back in time, first to the Roman Empire, where the child watches the roots of greed take hold in the human heart, then to medieval Europe to watch distrust sprout, to the time of exploration and the abhorrent nationalism that followed. Tam watches as races were enslaved and executed to make way for the conquering civilized tribes. He is shown the distortions of faith that perverted the soul and man's injustice in all forms. He is shown the horror of war and the solitude that follows, the times of violence and the times of apathy, the inhumanity behind the monstrous rise of titanic corporations, the beginnings and furtherings of man's machines, and the power sources used to animate them. And when this sweep through the ages is through, they are standing in the noisy crowd that is packed into Leal Torek's arena. Daniel bends down to speak to the child. "Tam Chi, I have done you a great wrong, and there is nothing that could amend it. You will have to live on the inside now, with many people who will take care of you, as you will have to take care of them. You will spend much of your life trying to recall the details of what I have shown you about man's evil side. But what you are seeing is essential. When the time comes for you to decide, you must remember that the society you live in was founded on that." Daniel points to the 2 men on the arena floor in a duel for their lives. Leal moves in for the kill and beheads his opponent. The crowd exults their praise for the leader. Tam covers his eyes with his hands. Daniel places his hand on the child's, lifting them away from his face, and the 2 are on a metallic platform on a body of water. People are bustling about them. Behind Daniel is a large metallic pyramid. They are on the runway of a tetracity. Tam's eyes widen as he looks up to the top of the structure. His eyes meet Daniel's. "You must rest now," Daniel says. "You will see me again, but rest now and think about what you have learned." Tam-Chi falls into Daniel's arms. Carrying the child to the entrance, Daniel requests medical assistance. 2 paramedics place the child on the stretcher and hurry away into the city with him. Daniel watches until he can see them no more. He breathes heavily for a moment, having a sudden awareness of the peace he feels inside. I would embellish on his thoughts, but he has none at this moment. In a flash of light, he has brought himself 40 years ahead to the same point in the Brazilian highlands. He walks towards the pale crystal tower that stands above the tree line. His steps are small as he makes his way down the hill, and I can sense how tired he is. He takes his time and runs his hand across the smooth crystalite. He looks up to see the small building within a walled boundary. The front gates of the wall are open, and he can see the large crowd of people that sit outside the closed doors of the humble wooden temple. He walks closer, wrapping his robe tightly as the rain begins. The air is cold and he shivers. As he walks within the gates, the sea of people part for him. He climbs the stairs of the temple and enters the darkened room. Tam-Chi Shoin, the child, has grown into a powerful man. He has mastered the mind and seeks to expand his control to the soul. He has reached high goals and had a hand in ending the corruption within the global society. He has fought to regain his sanity since he was 5, and now he sits, understanding what is needed and waiting to usher in greatness and unbounded prosperity for humankind. He has discovered and mapped out the mechanics of the soul and is poised to bring about the awakening. Daniel knows this to be so and stands, waiting for Tam to understand why he is here. He waits in silence, but recognizes himself as the weaker of the two. "Tam," he says, "I have returned to you in hopes that you have learned all you need to know." "I have learned it all in this life," Shoin answers. "I trust you have mastered what you've learned," Daniel says. "Yes." "Then I am here to test you." Daniel takes a deep breath. "I was responsible for the death of your parents." Tam-Chi is silent. The attack is immediate and so quick that Daniel barely gets out of the way. Tam has risen and thrusts his arms at Daniel, causing a sharpened wave to ripple through the air. It strikes the far wall and shakes the building. Daniel returns with a wave that shakes the dirt floor beneath them. Tam jumps and flips in the air. As he lands, he crouches and lays his palms on the ground. The quaking stops, and Daniel falls backwards. Looking up, he sees Tam in the air lunging at him. Daniel lifts his arms and emits a stream of blue energy that disperses the image of Tam and punches a hole in the far wall. Tam hadn't left the ground. Daniel had fired on a decoy. Standing, Daniel deflects a number of direct punches from Tam-Chi and is forced back 3 paces before he grabs an extended arm and throws his opponent to the ground. Tam springs back to his feet and charges. Swinging with all his might, Tam projects a red glow around his right fist. Daniel catches the punch and channels the energy through himself and out his other arm. The blue fist of Daniel sails forward into the rising hand of Tam Chi Shoin, who channels the energy through himself and focuses it in his chest. A purple bolt erupts from his chest and strikes Daniel, knocking him back to the far wall, splintering the wood on contact. Daniel stands. You've learned much and taught yourself well. He breathes deeply. He lifts his arms to his sides and claps them together in front of him in a large gesture. Two large waves in the air close in on Tam. Lifting his own arms, Tam Chi bows his head and concentrates. The waves pass through him and move not one hair. When they reach the walls, the temple trembles again. Spinning himself round, Tam throws a blade of energy at Daniel, who ducks and watches another hole be cut in the wall behind him. Reaching down into himself and solidifying his spirit, Daniel pushes his right hand through the air, and Tam is lifted off the ground. Shoin pushes back on the invisible field that pins him high on the wall. Daniel rights himself and looks about for a means to contain his prisoner. Seeing the momentary hesitation, Tam uses the power holding him to convey a bolt of energy. It moves along the invisible caber and strikes Daniel with enough power to knock him to the floor. His energy fades, and he slumps into a rejuvenation trance. Tam drops to the ground and stands up suddenly. He walks with rage in his stride until he is above Daniel. Kneeling down, he holds the face of my Creator in his hands. Daniel's eyes were open the slightest bit. Tam Chi balls his hand into a dense fist that vibrates with fury. Daniel smiles. Do you have the power to kill a man? He asks. Tam Chi Shoin's eyes become distant as the actuality of that moment becomes clear to him. His fist unclenches and his touch becomes gentle on Daniel's face. Yes, he replies as he helps Daniel to his feet. Daniel laughs and smiles and pats Shoin on the back. He congratulates Tam on his decision and grips his arm hard and looks solemnly into his eyes. Self-vigilance is the price of spirituality, Daniel says. Daniel walks outside and presents the crowd with their new mentor. Daniel tells them that should they follow him, they would bring an enlightenment upon themselves and the world. And then my Creator burst into the infinite.